The philosophy of science.
Well, actually, misconceptions.
Artificial intelligence.
And the real reason
Part
that the
2.
Earth goes around the Sun is that space-time is curved, a concept that couldn't even have been formulated at the time of Newton.
David Deutsch, quantum computing pioneer, on what it will take to make computers think. And you're listening to him on The Philosopher's Zone, here on RN. The thing that's divided people to a large degree about whether there can be such a thing as artificial intelligence is that the question of consciousness and what it is has to be properly understood before we can take a further step. Is this part of the philosophical breakthrough that might need to be done?
This is slightly a separate issue, whether we need to understand consciousness. The reason is this. I happen to think, but this is a separate matter from my views about whether AGI is imminent or that kind of thing. I happen to think that all the properties of minds that are currently deemed to be mysterious, and that includes consciousness, and it includes creativity, and it includes free will, for example, that they are all actually the same. If so, then we need only solve the easiest of those, which I'm guessing is creativity, because creativity, the creation of knowledge, is the one that we currently know the most about. We know Popper's theory of knowledge, which is a huge starting point on the way of understanding how creativity can possibly work. But if I'm wrong that those three things are all really the same thing, then that doesn't affect the point I'm making about AGI, because if we did solve the problem of creativity but not the problem of consciousness, we would still have a computer program that had the functionality of a conscious being. In other words, it could do what conscious beings do. It could create new ideas, it could solve problems in science, it could pass Alan Turing's test for being an AGI, namely that it could converse on a human level with a human, and the human couldn't tell that it wasn't a human. So it could do all those external things, and possibly, without having consciousness or free will, it would just look as though it had them. Philosophers sometimes call this position the zombie theory, because such an AGI would have the external appearance of a human. Well, actually, they obviously haven't seen zombie movies, but this would be the kind of zombie that looks exactly like a human, but hasn't got any personhood in the sense of having human feelings, human sensations. That would just look as though it had them.
Yeah. I was thinking about the zombie thought experiment when you were putting that forward, this idea of the machine that can do it all, but doesn't really know it's actually doing it all, or experiencing it from the inside.
I think it's implausible that there could be such a machine, but if there could, and if the people who think that creativity is separate from consciousness and all that stuff are right, it doesn't at all affect my point about AGI, because my point about AGI is focused on the functionality of AGI.
And this functionality, you say, can be captured if an algorithm could be tapped into, which tapped into creativity, and how creativity deals with context and justifying knowledge within the arena of error.
Yes, creating knowledge within the arena of error. Yes, that's right. Exactly. If I take an analogy, for example, in the early 19th century, when we didn't know what life was, unless somebody had made the philosophical breakthrough that Darwin made to realize that the shapes of animals are not what the process that made them is about. The process that made them is about these traits, as he called them, or what we would today call genes, which create the shapes of animals as a side effect. So if somebody hadn't understood that, and they had thought that the problem of the origin of species is so on, was why is an elephant the shape it is, why does it have a trunk, and so on, then they would concentrate their efforts on trying to sculpt elephants on a finer and finer scale, in the hope that if they did it on a fine enough scale, the elephant would suddenly start walking away and being exactly like a normal elephant. And they'd be completely wrong, because the point of the correct theory of why elephants are the shape that they are not about the shape. They are about natural selection and replication and variation and differential survival and accurate copying of genes, not of the animal's body, and so on. All those things are hidden when you look at an elephant. But it's only if you understood those things that you would have the slightest chance of knowing why the elephant has a trunk, let alone making an artificial elephant. My intuition is that it will be very easy to program. It's the understanding it that's hard.
Ah, intuition. Let's not go there. Well, not today anyway. Pioneer of quantum computation, David Deutsch, calling for a new philosophical understanding to break the impasse on AGI, artificial general intelligence, and he'll take it with or without consciousness. Next week, a fitting finale for Season 1, renowned philosopher Simon Blackburn on human nature and science. He's subject for the inaugural...
There you go. The philosophy of artificial general intelligence. You heard it on Wobbles on What Channel. Ciao.